Kayo na maka-unmute sa akin. Forty. Twenty. Good evening, I'm Robbie Alampay. The big stories tonight. Health Secretary Francisco Duque admits some lapses on his part over the allegations hurled against PhilHealth, but he maintains his innocence. AFP Chief of Staff faces the Commission on Appointments, but was grilled over his interpretation of the anti-terror law and the measure's threats against freedom of expression. Despite President Duterte himself announcing that the trials for Russia's Sputnik V COVID-19 vaccine are slated for October, the Department of Health says the trials are yet to be scheduled. And with everyone adjusting to the so-called new normal, the Commission on Elections is looking to allow virtual campaigns for the 2022 elections. We begin tonight with embattled Health Secretary Francisco Duque clearing his name at the lower house, but at the same time admitting some lapses on his part as he focuses on the COVID-19 pandemic. Ria Fernandez has this report.
Up until the last congressional hearing on the allegations hounding the Philippine Institute Insurance Corporation today, Health Secretary Francisco Duque insists his hands are clean of anomalies. Duque reiterated that he had no role in the agency's questionable release of funds under the Interim Reimbursement Mechanism or IRM. Over a week ago, Duque was tagged as the alleged godfather of a supposed mafia in the agency.
I was impeded on the IRM when I was not even part of the deliberation and did not sign the said resolution.
However, House Public Accounts Chairperson Mike Defensor thinks PhilHealth must stop unnecessary expenses, such as the inclusion of suspected COVID-19 cases in the IRM. He noted that the state health insurer will only face losses if it decides to keep an all-case rate scheme. The lawmaker also asked Duque about the huge discrepancy between the recorded pneumonia cases of the health department and PhilHealth in 2017. Duque explained that they only had 450,000 cases since the data only came from public health institutions, while PhilHealth reported 700,000 due to claims coming from accredited private hospitals. Nevertheless, Duque said all these policies are now under review. Despite this, Duque admitted his failure to oversee PhilHealth, saying he was focused on addressing the pandemic. Currently, the DOH has over 100 vaccine candidates, but he is not certain yet when the vaccine will arrive in the country.
Ito po, Your Honor, ay binabantayan ng inyo pong kagawaran at ang DOST at ang WHO, sinisiguro po na hindi tayo magpapahuli sa access po sa mga bakunang ito.
Duque is optimistic, though, that newly installed PhilHealth Chief Dante Giran will be able to ferret out scalawags and bring back the public's confidence in the agency. He is also supporting the plan of the House panels to grant the President emergency powers over PhilHealth.
Sa kaso po ng PhilHealth ngayon, under the leadership of Attorney Dante Giran, kinakailangan niya na maglagay ng mga personnel, tumulong sa kanya immediately, pwede din mga kumpanya na umalalay sa kanya sa IT, and so we will give that powers to him and to reorganize PhilHealth as they seem fit.
House Committee on Public Accounts Chairman Mike Defensor said they are finalizing the charges, including plunder, to be filed against those involved in PhilHealth irregularities. The task force PhilHealth under the executive branch will also present their own findings on September 14th. Before the House panels terminated the hearings, coronadal neurologist Mark Dennis Menguita was cited in contempt after clapping back at a lawmaker who exposed his alleged modus in collecting overclaims from PhilHealth. But since it's his birthday today, the committees decided to just make his penalty a warning. For News 5, Ria Fernandez, we are One News.
Some senators, however, are not buying Duque's explanation, saying his cluelessness in the alleged PhilHealth anomalies prove negligence on his part. In today's Senate interpellation on the Committee of the Whole report on PhilHealth, Senate President Tito Soto said it's impossible that billions of pesos worth of corruption went undetected under Duque's leadership.
Kasi kung sasagutin tayo ng opisyal na sasabihin, wala akong alam dyan. Imposible, Mr. President. You are chairman of the board. You are spending billions. And it is through the Department, the PhilHealth and the Department of Health. Imposible, hindi mo alam.
The Senate panel recommended the appointment of a new health secretary in its Committee of the Whole report. Senator Soto also denied concerns on conflicting reports released by the Committee of the Whole and that of Senator Richard Gordon's Blue Ribbon Committee. Gordon's report sought accountability from PhilHealth's regional officials, but Soto says this recommendation is also present in the report from the Committee of the Whole. Gordon is set to present his committee's findings on Monday. The palace says it respects the position of the Senate on the alleged irregularities in PhilHealth, but will defer any action pending the findings from a DOJ-led task force. Presidential spokesperson Harry Roque says President Duterte expects the task force to finish their investigation by September 14 and hopefully submit their recommendations by the end of the month. Recall that the Senate Committee of the Whole recommended the filing of criminal and administrative charges against Health Secretary Francisco Duque and 8 other PhilHealth executives over what is now being branded as a multi-billion peso scam.
Senado, pero pagdating po doon sa pananagutan ng mga individual dyan sa PhilHealth, inaantay pa po ni Presidente yung resulta ng investigasyon ng task force na binuo niya. At kapag rekomendasyon ay kasuhan ng ilang mga tao dahil lahat sila yung mga ombudsman, pwede na pong gumalaw ang ombudsman.
Newly installed PhilHealth Chief Dante Giran says he is up to the challenge of weeding out corruption in the agency. He says he will do so within 2 years. In an interview last night with the chiefs, Giran said he will look at PhilHealth's financial condition and, if necessary, ask Congress for additional funding. It was revealed in a Senate probe early last month that the agency faces collapse by 2022 should the pandemic continue, despite admitting that he has no public health background, which is required under the Universal Healthcare Law. Giran says he can fix PhilHealth's problems within President Duterte's term in office. The Commission on Appointments has given the green light to the ad interim appointment of AFP Chief of Staff Gilbert Gapay today, but that's not without senators grilling the general first on his interpretation of the controversial anti-terror law. Mean Los Baños with the story. Senators were quick to react on President Duterte's sudden openness to talk about calls for a revolutionary government after distancing himself from the group pushing for it. For Senator Panfilo Lacson, a revolutionary government is dangerous and has no legal basis. The former PNP chief added it is divisive and can cause social unrest and even civil war. Senator Serna Angara stresses that part of a democratic country's maturity is living under the Constitution and following civilian rule. Opposition Senator Kiko Pangilinan says this is not the time to discuss calls for RevGov. Rather, the government, he says, should discuss more pressing matters like its COVID-19 response, which he described as marred with incompetence, corruption, and headed nowhere. Along with the extension of the general community quarantine in Metro Manila and nearby areas is the return to business of gyms and salons, but business owners are struggling to attract clients as the COVID-19 pandemic threat still continues. Shiloh Francisco with the story.
Customers of this gym in Taguig now need to download a mobile app to access its facilities and reserve workout slots. As physical group classes remain prohibited for now, instructors only conduct online classes. Aside from regularly sanitizing the facilities, gym goers are also given sanitizers and cloth to clean the equipment that they will use. Trade officials are satisfied with the health protocols being implemented in gyms as well as other establishments that have just reopened. Meanwhile, hair and nail salons as well as pet grooming stores have imposed customer limits. Workers in some of these businesses are also wearing PPEs. Customers are asked to fill out health declaration and contact tracing forms upon entry. But despite the availability of forms, the DTI learned that some customers refuse to give out contact details.
We understand na pinoprotection na nila ang privacy nila, pero it's also very important na mag-contact sila kung sakaling may ma-discover na outbreak or mga yung infection dun sa lugar.
Despite more businesses being allowed to reopen, they have noticed a significant decline in their usual number of customers. Some have resorted to offering promos and discounts to attract more customers.
Of course, coronavirus affected, like I would say, 50% of the business because we closed already for 5 months. We just reopened slowly. Some people are still afraid to go out. So that's why we have a marketing.
Kasi wala na po kami kliyente naka-appointment. So sa loob ng 1-2 oras po wala na kami kliyente. So tamat na lang po kami ng walk.
With or without discounts, some customers said they are happy just seeing their favorite business establishments reopening.
I need to exercise too. Para at least makas din yung ano natin, immune system. Bumili na ako ng treatment sa bahay. I still look for the gyms talaga.
Super happy po kasi for about 4 to 5 months, hindi ka nagkaroon ng chance to pamper yourself. So now, eto na nag-open na sila. I'm really excited na maka-relax.
Currently, reopened establishments such as gyms and those offering personal grooming services are allowed to operate at 30% capacity. For now, the DTI does not see the need to expand it, noting that these businesses should first get used to the health protocols before accepting more customers. Shiloh Francisco, VR1 News.
We'll have more stories when we return after a short break. Please stay with us. Good evening. You're watching The Big Story. Phase 3 of clinical trials for Russia's Sputnik V vaccine is expected to start next month, but the health department said the vaccine's important data from earlier trials are still pending review. Greg Gregorio tells us more.
It is still uncertain when the eyed Phase 3 clinical trials for Russia's Sputnik V vaccine finally begin in the Philippines. President Duterte earlier announced it would start by October. However, Health Undersecretary Maria Rosario Vergara says data on the vaccine candidates' earlier trials are still pending review.
Pinag-aaralan pa rin ng ating vaccine experts panel itong phase 1 and phase 2 trials na nangyari para dito sa Sputnik V at magbibigay sila ng impormasyon sa atin kung ito ay magiging acceptable at saka kung ito ay magiging feasible, no, na pag-usapan na magkaroon din ng clinical trial dito sa ating bansa for the Sputnik V vaccine.
Health experts earlier emphasized that it would take some time before a clinical trial, phase 3, of a certain vaccine be allowed in the country. Among the regulatory procedures is an approval from the Food and Drug Administration. FDA Director General Eric Dominguez says to date, no group has applied for any approval of any clinical trial phase 3. Vergara meanwhile clarified that the reported clinical trials slated for 2 vaccines in the province of Cavite have no approval from authorities yet.
Walang pwedeng mag-umpisa ng any clinical trial kung wala kayong approval ng FDA at wala kayong approval ng ethics review. If you do that, you are violating specific laws. So you will be sanctioned and you will be asked to stop.
As for Japanese drug Avigan, DOH said clinical trials have been pushed back anew. Vergara says protocols to be used in Jose N. Rodriguez Memorial Hospital, Santa Ana Hospital, and Cari Memorial Medical Center are still pending review.
So ang inaantay ho natin yung 3 ospital para makapag-final na po ng approval for the ethics review. Ito pong isa pa ay yung ating clinical trial agreement. Kailangan lang ho ma-finalize.
The Health Department meanwhile reports an improvement in the country's case doubling time, mortality doubling time, and rate of transmission as of August 31. Case doubling time is at around 10 days, while mortality doubling time is at around 50 days. This means it takes more than a week or 2 before the numbers go even higher. The current rate of transmission stands at 0.977%, which means a COVID-positive individual can only infect 1 other person at most. Vergara notes that while these reflect the aggressive efforts in containing the COVID-19 spread in communities, the public should remain cautious. As of today, the Philippines has recorded over 226,000 cases of COVID-19, in which 64,000 are active. More than 3,000 died from COVID-19, while 158,000 have recovered. For News 5, Greg Gregorio, we are One News.
Manila Mayor Isko Moreno is warning health establishments they could face closure if they do not properly dispose of hazardous materials. This after some residents raised concerns over used COVID-19 test kits seen scattered in Manila streets. JC Cosico with the details.
In this video, white packets were seen scattered along the stretch of De La Fuente Street near Trabajo Market in Manila around 9 p.m. last night. These packets, however, turned out to be used COVID-19 test kits.
Yung nilapitan ko kasi siya, nakita ko nakalagay doon COVID talaga. Pinangamba ako, diba? Kumbaga, hindi lang para sa akin pati na rin sa mga kasama namin dito sa barangay namin
The used test kits even reached the corners of España Boulevard. In a CCTV footage from Barangay 453, Zone 45, pieces of used test kits were seen falling off from a sack loaded on a scavenger sidecar. Some delivery riders who witnessed the incident tried to get the scavenger's attention.
Sinawin namin kasi basura nga yung dala niya, akala namin basura lang na Tinawakan nung kasama namin dyan, sabi niya PT. Makita niya may dugo, tapos kapang rapid test pala sinabi ng yung mga basura mo, kumakalat, sabi. Tapos, wala, hindi nga pinansin
That's why some residents can't help but worry.
Kasi baka maging affected yung health ng mga tao around dito sa mga residente. gawa nga nung nagamit na yon, di natin alam kung may mga positive ba dun sa rapid test kit na yon.
Barangay personnel cleared the used test kits and turned them over to the Manila Department of Public Services for proper disposal. The street was also disinfected. Authorities are now looking for the scavenger in the video to locate where the used test kits came from. Manila Mayor Isko Moreno says they already have a lead on this. He warns establishments caught not properly disposing hazardous waste might put their business at risk.
Any laboratory, corporation, businesses, or clinic that will not dispose properly hazardous materials will face closure of their businesses in the city of Manila. Kung kayo'y magtatayo ng clinic, magtatayo ng laboratory, especially testing, gumagamit kayo ng mga injection and testing kits, you really have to follow procedures.
The Department of Health seconded this, saying neglected hazardous waste may put others' health and safety in peril.
It should be placed in a bag na meron pong label yan na healthcare waste yan. Meron ho tayong mga designated na mga pinaglalagyan itong healthcare waste natin as approved by the Department of Environment and Natural Resources, no? So hindi po dapat ito kung saan-saan lang tinatapon.
For News 5, JC Cosico, we are One News.
And we do have an update on that story. Authorities have located the clinic in Manila where the used COVID-19 test kits originated, and the owner has admitted to its improper disposal of hazardous materials. Manila's Bureau of Permits, OIC, Levy Facundo, filed a show cause order against CP Diagnostic Clinic in Quiapo. They also suspended the clinic's operation for 3 days while the local government is waiting for their response to the order. Authorities also discovered that the clinic's sanitation permit has already expired. Based on initial investigation, CP Diagnostic Clinic's contract with an independent waste collector was not renewed. The Commission on Appointments has given the green light to the ad interim appointment of AFP Chief of Staff Gilbert Gapay today, but that is not without senators grilling the general first on his interpretation of the controversial anti-terror law. Menos Baños with the story.
During the hearing of the Commission on Appointments this morning, senators repeatedly asked AFP Chief of Staff General Gilbert Gapay if they have the same interpretation on the implementation of the anti-terror law. Senator Franklin Dillon asked General Gapay what he meant with his earlier statement on the regulation of social media use as part of the law's implementing rules and regulations. Dillon clarified that the anti-terror law has no intention of curtailing the public's freedom of expression nor putting any prior restraint. Though Dillon explained that under the newly enacted law, those who will use social media for terrorist acts will be punished post facto or after the fact by filing charges against those who will be found guilty. But the senator insists this does not mean that the law empowers the government to suppress the right of the people to express. Gapay clarified that what they want to regulate are not the users but the service providers. He explained that they are already in touch with Facebook to help them with their fight against terrorism. Gapay says that based on intelligence reports, terrorists use social media to promote and recruit members and also to solicit logistical and material support.
The goal of this regulation will be to make social media platforms, the service providers, more liable for the contents they host. This includes their responsibility to enforce the traceability of content, or purportedly to enable accountability.
Gapay also assured the CA that the AFP has no intention of curtailing press freedom. But senators aren't comfortable with the idea of regulating the social media platform either, saying this would lead to limiting the access of the public to the social media, which could also be considered as prior restraint.
What should be punished as contemplated in the law, in the Anti-Terrorism Act of 2020, is the conduct and the actual act without reference to prior restraint. Is that your understanding? So ang ipaparusahan lang natin yung actual act of facilitating, recruiting, di ba? But not yung prior. We cannot regulate social media. I confirm that we do not intend to really curtail freedom of expression as guaranteed by our Constitution. And of course, we don't want to impose any or curtail that, or impose prior restraint to anybody. And what we're suggesting are the acts themselves should be regulated pertaining to really in combating terrorism.
Gapay meanwhile clarified that they are mere implementers of the law and they will adhere to it to the letter. They have no power to expand the application of the law, but they will only give suggestions based on their monitoring of actual imminent dangers. In the same confirmation hearing, senators also asked Gapay of his position on the calls for a revolutionary government, to which Gapay directly answered that the AFP is not supporting any calls for RevGov, as this is unconstitutional and politically motivated. Gapay also assured the Senate that no member of AFP will participate in any move to push RevGov. In the end, the Commission on Appointments approved the nomination of Gapay for the rank of General. Reporting for News 5, Mean Los Baños, BR1 News.
An Olongapo City Court has ordered the early release of former U.S. Marine Joseph Scott Pemberton after supposedly serving his 10-year sentence by applying good conduct time allowance credits. Pemberton was convicted over the killing of trans woman Jennifer Laude in 2014. He has served only 6 years in jail. Palace spokesman Harry Roque, who had served as former counsel for the Laude family, slammed the court order. He said Pemberton's short period in prison reflects, quote, the death of Philippine sovereignty. The Transportation Department is distancing itself from being involved with the Chinese contractor regarding the construction of the Sangli Airport in Cavite. Transportation Assistant Secretary Goddess Libiran clarified that the project is under the provincial government of Cavite and the China Communications Construction Company, or CCCC. She added that the department continues to rehabilitate Sangli Airport, which is independent from Cavite's plans. Cavite Governor John D. Cremula earlier said that if the CCC is deemed as a threat to national security, it is up to the national government if they will terminate the company's involvement in airport projects. Macro Asia Corporation, the joint venture partner of CCCC, echoed Remula's statement. CCCC is one of the blacklisted companies in the United States for being involved in the dredging and construction of artificial military islands in the South China Sea. But the palace says the country will not follow the U.S. directive. Hence, the Sangli Airport project and other Chinese-backed projects will push through. The Philippine National Police welcomes its second highest official, Camilo Caspulan, as its new head, as outgoing Chief Archie Gamboa bows out of service after officially hitting the mandatory retirement age of 56 today. Caspulan, though, is also set to retire on November 10, just more than 2 months after assuming his new post. Despite this, Caspulan assumed the role based on the rule of succession as PNP's most senior official. The palace also says the president is confident with Caspulan's ability to lead the national police despite his nearing retirement. Duterte also gave the new police chief a few reminders.
Well, tingin ko po, meron naman talagang sapat na kakayahan po si General Caspulan para pamunuan ng PNP. At nagkataon lang talaga na napakaaga ng retirement ng ating kapulisan. No? November, magre-retire na siya. Pero hayaan natin siyang bigyan ng pagkakataon na linisin ang hanay ng PNP, uphold the Constitution and the rule of law, and siyempre po kinakailangan ipatuloy ang mga gains of the drug war.
Before being the PNP's deputy head for administration, Caspulan also became director for operations. He was later NCRPO director in April 2018. Gamboa and Caspulan were both members of the PMA Sinagtala class of 1986. In the change of command ceremony, Caspulan said he is confident the PNP will regain the Filipinos' confidence even in the face of the ongoing pandemic. The Commission on Elections is eyeing to replace in-person campaigns with online campaigns ahead of the 2022 presidential elections as the country continues to deal with the COVID-19 pandemic. In One News agenda, Comelec spokesperson James Jimenez said they will encourage more candidates to hold a series of webinars instead of exposing people to possible contagions during physical campaign rallies. Jimenez, though, admits the limitations of online campaigning in connecting the public, but he notes that this is the safest way to go, given the circumstances brought on by the health crisis. Jimenez is also urging Filipinos to register and to vote better in the 2022 elections, especially those who are currently unsatisfied with the government's response to the pandemic.
We get the governance we deserve. Essentially, we get the governance that we voted for. So, yung sinasabi mo kanina, totoo yan eh. Hindi ka makakatanggap ng ayuda, hindi ka magiging eligible for many services kung hindi ka registered voter. But I would go a little further and say that dahil binoto mo yung binoto mo, ganyan ngayon ang natatanggap mong tulong at serbisyo sa gobyerno. Kung magaling yung binoto mo, then nakikita mo rin. Magaling yung serbisyong natatanggap mo. Malinaw ang direksyon na binibigay sa inyo ng local government, malinaw ang mga polisiya na pinapatupad, patas ang pagpapatupad.
And that wraps up today's big story. Catch us again tomorrow, 8 p.m. Signal channels 8 and 250. Please like our Facebook page, One News. For more in-depth analysis, visit our webpage, onenews.ph. I'm Robbie Alampay. We are One News. Good evening.